Well, for more on this now, we're joined by Professor of Political Science Peter Mathews, who's in Long Beach in California. He's the author of the book Dollar Democracy. Good evening to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us. Now, the G7 powers are seeking broad support to isolate President Assad. How likely is it, do you feel, that Rex Tillerson will persuade Moscow to abandon Assad?
It is very unlikely that he'll persuade them entirely to come out entirely against saying they will abandon Assad, because that's one of the longest serving allies in the Middle East, and they have a strategic partnership because Russia has two military bases in Syria. One is the only warm water port it has in the Mediterranean, and this is strategic. So Russia wants to hold on to Assad. They're also asking the question, who will come after Assad? Let's suppose the United States and the allies are able to knock out Assad. Then the question is, who will follow him? A question that was not answered in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was taken out. Who would follow Hussein? What would follow Hussein? Wasn't answered, wasn't looked into very carefully. And this has to be done very carefully. I think that'll be pointed out tomorrow as well. So Tillerson has a very major challenge on his hands tomorrow in trying to convince the Russians to drop their support for Assad at this point.
We have Vladimir Putin saying he doesn't believe the Assad regime was behind last week's chemical attack, saying that information about planned fake chemical attacks in Syria are justifications for more US missile strikes. Meanwhile, the White House has accused Putin of confusing the world with false narratives. What is going on here?
Well, the United States position, of course, is through our intelligence agency's report that there was, actually, they're still studying the situation, but Trump himself and the administration has said that Assad was behind the attacks, that he actually dropped the bombs. But the intelligence communities are still studying the situation, as is the United Nations, to find out who was really behind this, because that's a very critical question to answer. If it was the rebels possibly involved in it, then that's a whole different equation than if the Assad government itself was involved once again, after having given up their weapons of chemical weapons back in 2013, ostensibly, because Russia was involved with that negotiation, and Russia was supposed to supervise that to make sure the Assad regime had no more chemical weapons. And today, Russia says that they don't have chemical weapons, that this was a rebel-held manufacturing storage plant where a bomb hit it from perhaps the Syrian Air Force and created, the chemicals, terrible situation which killed so many people. But that's their version of it. And I think what we should do is let's do some more research. Let both the people who are looking into it carefully to research more carefully to see who is really behind this, because that's the key question for the whole equation and how to resolve it right now. And we are confronting a very serious situation. This could escalate into a war with Russia, between the US and Russia, which would be just totally untenable. We've never fought a war with Russia outright since the Russian Revolution, when some of the allies invaded Russia and the US troops were on Russian soil trying to stop the Bolshevik Revolution. Since that time, we've never fought a war with Russia, and we've always attempted to stay away from that.
Professor, as you say, the key is finding out who is behind this. If it were to emerge that it wasn't Assad, how badly would that reflect on Donald Trump?
It would be a terrible blow to him and his prestige and to his judgment, because he did not even wait more than a couple of days before he launched those missiles in retaliation for an alleged strike that wasn't proven fully. So that would look very bad on him, if that happens to be the case. In 2013, there was some question about that sarin attack as well, whether it was the government or the rebels. There's a lot of different research on it saying that it could have been not the government forces back in 2013. In fact, the New York Times took that off of its list of Assad's egregious activity. So we have to wait and see what the reports will come out this time around before someone like Trump should even have fired those missiles. That was, I think, premature in my view.
Bearing in mind that the president is said to have shares in the company that manufactures the missiles used last week, and that his administration is boosting the defence budget, is this a case, dare I say it, of the Trump administration looking for a war?
I don't think he's looking for a war to make money, because I looked up his investments there in Raytheon, and he only made $201 in dividends in 2015, so it's not that much money. But I do think that raises an issue of conflict of interest. When a person is in office, a high office, any office actually, public office, they should really be careful about putting their assets and their income in a blind trust, so there's no conflict of interest possibly that would arise between their public policy interests, the public policy decisions, and their private gain. Someone as ancient as Plato brought this up. The philosopher in Greece in ancient times said that the gold class, the ruling class at that time, in his ideal state, should never even own private property. In the case of Trump, he owns 500 businesses around the world, and the blind trust that he says he's ostensibly put them in is not blind at all. He's still making money off those businesses, and he also talks to his son, who's supposed to be in charge of the blind trust. Very interesting conflict of interest that has to be looked at carefully.
Professor Peter Mathews, thank you very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.